Hey everyone, welcome in. We're going to get started here in just a minute. While we're waiting on everyone to join, please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm Leah Hudson. I'm a senior campaign specialist here at DBT Labs, and I am joining you from Portland, Oregon. Alrighty, let's get going. So thank you all so much for joining us for OneDBT Accelerate Data Work with Hybrid Deployments and Cross-Platform DBT Mesh. This virtual event is part of a series, our OneDBT series. This is the second episode focused on accelerating data work with hybrid deployments and cross-platform DBT mesh, which you already know because I just said that. Alrighty. But before that, we had our first episode that was focused on OneDBT, the control plane for data collaboration at scale. And that included a DBT Copilot demo. So if you'd like to watch that, if you haven't seen it, it's available on demand. You can access it in the doc section of Goldcast. I'll also post that in the chat here in a minute for you. But if you already joined us for part one, welcome back for part two. We're so happy that you're here. And I also want to tell you all about episode 3. So we have that coming up in January. For that episode, we're going to focus on how to use DBT Cloud and specifically DBT Explorer to build data products that your team can trust. So that's also in the doc section of Goldcast, and I'll also post a link to register that in the chat as well for y'all. And some housekeeping things. So we have a Q&A tab. Please ask all of your questions in the Q&A tab. That way we can keep those nice and organized for you. We also have the normal chat for whatever banter about the presentation you'd like. And the recording, I will be sending y'all the recording within 24 hours after this event. So keep a lookout for that in your email inbox, share it with your team. And then a survey. I will send out a survey at the end of today's session. Please take that survey for us. We'd love to know how to improve these sessions for y'all in the future. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to our presenters. So Jeff, take it away.
All right, thank you, Leah. Welcome everyone to the second in a series of follow-up discussions about our announcements from Coalesce 2024, just a short 8 weeks ago. Today I'm joined by our staff product manager, Amy Chen. Amy is in charge of all of our adapters here at DBT. And my name is Jeff Mills. I lead all of our partner marketing efforts here at DBT, and I'm going to take you through the first half of today's conversation. So we're going to cover a couple of different things in a little bit more detail than we did at Coalesce and bring everyone up to speed on the latest innovations from DBT. I'm going to start with talking a little bit about our vision for the future. That is OneDBT, unifying experiences for everyone who interacts with DBT and specifically everyone who interacts with data at their companies. Second, we're going to talk about a framework called the data control plane that is going to be critical to delivering that OneDBT experience. And then I'll go into more detail about one of our larger announcements, which was support for hybrid deployments in which DBT Core and DBT Cloud can coexist within a single organization. Then I'll bring Amy up. And Amy will talk about all of the new adapters that we put in place, our support for Iceberg, and then a demonstration of what that support for Iceberg does and in extending DBT Mesh to multiple data platforms at any given time. So let's go ahead and jump in. One of the big themes from Coalesce, and which will be sort of our North Star as a company going forward, is this idea of working with our customers to unify experiences. Many of you work across different clouds, whether that's AWS, whether that's GCP, or whether that's Azure. Also, many organizations that we work with have their data in multiple places. They have them on different data platforms. And that can oftentimes cause challenges when trying to assemble a complete view of the data. And then lastly, there are more than just data teams who interact with data across an organization. And it's when we spend time unifying the clouds, the platforms, and the people that we can deliver the impact of DBT across an organization. Now, one of the ways in which we are focused on delivering that unified experience is through this cyclic process called the analytics development lifecycle. This helps folks go from working with their data to operationalizing that data and starting that cycle all over again. One of the things that we hear from data teams all the time is that they build their data programs, and then people are always asking, where did that data come from? Where can I trust it? Is there rigor in the process? And this analytics development lifecycle borrows principles from another well-used framework to delivering great products to market, and that's the sales development, or I'm sorry, the software development lifecycle. And so can we borrow from that framework and apply that to the data work that people are doing? We actually think so. And we think that this is going to be critical to creating a unified experience for everyone in an organization that's working with data. Now, you might be asking yourself, how do then I go about implementing ADLC within my organization? And we think that is sort of a multi-dimensional problem, all sort of solved by something we call the data control plane. Now, we're calling it the data control plane, but it's actually a term that's been rallied around inside of the industry. It wasn't necessarily named by us, but we think that this is critical to deploying the ADLC. And the data control plane holds a couple of different things in it. The first is orchestration, observability, catalog semantics, and transformations. Now, of course, there's the data pipeline, which is ingesting that data into a system in which you can transform it and use it. And then at the end of that pipeline are your analytics, your AI, or your BI deployments that then use those data products. And we find at DBT that wrapping ourselves around this portion of the data control plane becomes really, really important. Now, we call this the active metadata layer because a transformation is this unique data asset within an organization and within a data lifecycle, in that it is a declarative statement of how the business thinks about the data and how that data should be organized to answer the business's questions. And so it's that information about the data that becomes incredibly valuable. And of course, orchestration does the same thing, right? It says, when is this going to be run? How fresh is it? Cataloging and semantics are metadata about where did that data come from? What's its lineage? And are the metrics that we are using within an organization vetted, calculated properly so that the data products you deliver create trusted data results at the end of that. Now, funny enough, I haven't met a single customer in my over 15 years of working in the data and analytics space who has all of their data on a given data platform. It's always in more than one place, and that can prove challenging. To create complete views of the data, to understand the interdependencies between your transactional and your analytics data across different platforms. And Amy's going to come and talk a little bit about how we're helping solve some of that complexity. And then lastly, it's not just the data team that works with data and that works in this process. It's your data engineers. It's your analysts. It's your marketing and revenue operations teams who are domain literate, but may not have the super deep technical skills that a data team does. And so how do we go about unifying that experience? Additionally, throughout the history of DBT, we have seen that people come to DBT in a bunch of different ways. People come to DBT through our open source offering, DBT Core. Actually, a majority of our people come to using DBT through that channel. Also, we get teams that maybe not using DBT Core, and they're using DBT Cloud because the teams that they work with or the teams that they're on aren't necessarily as technically advanced, or need their deployments to be managed, or want things like lineage, a catalog, metrics, so that they can all work faster and have more accurate and trusted results. Now, we're going to now explore a little bit around how does DBT Core and DBT Cloud help the people and organizations that end up using both. Now, as a precursor to this conversation and one DBT and hybrid deployments, is that if you have DBT Cloud, DBT Core probably doesn't make a ton of sense because you've got all of the benefits of DBT Core, with all of the supporting cast of capabilities with DBT Cloud. This is for those of you who have started with DBT Core, have maybe been asked, would you want to move to DBT Cloud? And said, I don't really think that's right for us now. Actually, being able to support both means that you can bring your impact with DBT to more people and get value out of DBT faster, even for those of you that work with DBT Core. Now, this isn't a novel thing that DBT is talking about. This is actually something that we see all the time. Yannick over at Roche actually talks about this, was on our stage at Keynote 8 weeks ago and talked about the DBT Core was how they jump-started their data platform's growth. So they made an investment in a data platform and then needed to show that it was being used and valuable. And they used DBT Core for that. But then DBT Cloud allowed them to scale that impact across the globe and across more data products within an organization. So what are some of the reasons that people would go about doing this? And again, this is for those that have core, but would like to scale their impact to more people across the organization. And it helps you build trust in your data teams, scaling efficiently. And then, of course, as we talked about that active metadata layer, you can then provide that metadata to your AI efforts so that the AI results are in context to how the business thinks about the data. It also helps you ship data products faster because it helps you bring on more contributors more quickly because DBT Cloud lowers the ramp time to using DBT. And lastly, DBT Cloud allows you to manage, reduce replicated efforts and jobs to reuse and make most cost-effective use of your compute for your transformations. Now, talk a little bit about what this looks like before and after. So before, what we typically found was that central data teams were using DBT Core, but all of those domain expertise teams, marketing operations, sales operations, people operations for that matter, were then taking the data products that the DBT Core folks were using and then using them on other platforms, mainly Google Sheets and Excel. And when we've got a hybrid deployment in place, you can then provide to those teams DBT tools that helps them use that data and create those data products that they need for the business inside of the envelope of DBT so that you as the data team have visibility and you as the domain expertise have access to world-class tools to work with your data. Now, a little bit about this diagram here. At Coalesce, we introduced this concept of the Jaffle Shop and Cirque du Jaffle. It was this merging of a sandwich shop and a circus. The details are both funny, but also actually indicative of what I see a lot of organizations happening with, whether it's a merger or an acquisition, whether it's the merging of two data teams, whether it's the migration from one data platform to the other, or the inclusion of a third data platform, is that the environments get complicated pretty quickly. And so the sandwich shop, the Jaffle Enterprises, had all of their sales data in Redshift using DBT Cloud to provide data products to their AI applications, their BI applications, their notebooks, and the machine learning. And then the circus company was looking at all of the on-site data from concessions or ticket sales or managing all of the talent that goes along with the circus. That data ended up being in S3 buckets, and they're using DBT Core with Athena, using AWS's Glue catalog to provide data products to build their BI applications. And it's in these situations in which you've got two different teams operating in two different ways, both using DBT, that need support. And that's what I want to jump into now is how do you go about deploying, what does a hybrid architecture look like? And this is, again, the primary use case for hybrid, is that you have your DBT Core foundational project, and then you have downstream projects within DBT Cloud that are specific for different domain expertise, for example. So this is a way in which you have your core foundational assets from DBT Core being used by those domain teams. And when we talk about scaling and leveraging your impact as a DBT Core user, this is what we mean pretty specifically. Now, one thing you might be asking yourself is, what if my DBT Core and my DBT Cloud versions aren't the same? And we recognize that can cause compatibility issues into the future, which is great, which is why this month we're announcing support for a new state of DBT for or deployment choice for DBT called compatible. And that will ensure that when you deploy DBT, either in DBT Core or with DBT Cloud, you are in a compatible state so that this type of deployment does not run into compatibility issues at all. Okay, so what do you got to do to get this going? There's actually three pretty simple steps, and we'll include in our follow-up documentation about how we go do that. But it follows a very basic pattern. First is preparing your core project for access through DBT Mesh. Okay, so DBT Mesh is how we're going to accomplish a hybrid architecture. And it's about focusing on, in this step, configuring your public models to serve as stable interfaces for downstream DBT projects. When I'm talking about downstream DBT projects, I'm talking about DBT Cloud in this case. The second thing that you've got to do is that you've got to mirror each producer project in core into DBT Cloud. So DBT Core ends up being the foundational layer, and DBT Cloud needs to know about what projects are coming to it from DBT Core. And so setting up all of your producer core projects in DBT Cloud is a critical step to making sure that DBT Cloud is ready to go. And then lastly, you've got to create and connect your downstream projects to your core project using DBT Mesh. So that helps ensure that as you make changes in DBT Core, DBT Cloud inherits those changes as part of the mesh architecture. And that's it, right? You get your core project ready with DBT Mesh. You mirror the projects that you want in DBT Cloud to be over in DBT Cloud. And then you establish a mesh connection between the two. And that's how we suggest that folks put hybrid architectures together. I'm really excited to see all of those core shops scale their impact with DBT Cloud in the future. And this brings me to the end of my section. And what I'd like to do now is hand it over to Amy Chen to share with you all of the things that they've been working on, including new adapters, Iceberg, and some extensions of DBT Mesh.
Thanks, Jeff. Now, when I stare at the slide, when I think about what one DBT means, I definitely express the fact that I am a glass empty kind of person. I think about who's missing from the room, who's missing from that post-it note wall. Because if DBT does not support your platform, well, there's no one DBT for you. There's no DBT. And as someone who started with Microsoft Access as my first database, I think a lot about how much DBT could have helped me in my 8,000 lines of Excel. And I'm sure you or someone you know is still kind of in that seat today. This is why I and DBT Labs, we're dedicated to expanding out who we can power with DBT. This way, you never have to ask, can I use DBT with that? As part of the initiative, we also want to ensure that you have the gift of choice. We want to make sure that if you want to use DBT Cloud, well, you should be able to. This year, we've brought in support for Athena and Teradata, joining Synapse and Fabric as part of the larger group of adapters we now support in DBT Cloud, which includes, of course, Redshift, Snowflake, Databricks. This way, you can use DBT with the stability and collaboration that your business expects. So now let's zoom in a little bit more about Athena. Besides the explosive growth we've seen for the community adoption of Athena, we also met customers like Moderna who are coming to us because it was a key component of their entire analytics stack that was built on AWS. They were using Athena alongside other compute engines and warehouses like Redshift. And the way they were doing that was in a way that ensured interoperability. To do that, they stored all of their data in S3 and Iceberg table format, which gets us to the next topic. Now, unless you've been living in a data desert, you have probably heard about Iceberg in some sense. There's been some very exciting announcements around an open table format called Apache Iceberg. And what Iceberg is a open standard for storing data and accessing metadata. And just like dbt, it's agnostic to data platforms and compute engines. Now, this is a massive development for any organization with data because it means more flexibility about how and where you can access it. And oftentimes, when people are thinking about integrations to Iceberg, it means a lot of things. It can mean integrations to just being able to create the table format, or integrations to the Iceberg compatible catalogs so that we can grab metadata from different sources. What we've launched just now is that we now have support for Iceberg table format. Now, with just one line of code in your dbt models, in your model materializations, you can ensure that it materializes in your storage solution as Iceberg table format. This means that you can benefit from the performance benefits of Iceberg, which is really designed for managing large-scale data sets, and also invest in the portability of Iceberg. This opens up the door for enabling access for multiple data platforms and helping you future-proof your data. And what I wasn't able to also talk about on stage at Coalesce was this isn't the end. You should expect to hear more announcements from us about more Iceberg integrations, hint, hint, catalogs, coming soon next year. Now that you're able to store your data in an accessible way, how does this actually work? Well, last year, we also launched something called dbt Mesh. dbt Mesh is a pattern for collaborating across multiple data projects aligned to business domains. The idea here is rather than relying on one single monolithic dbt project that can be easily bottlenecked by inefficient processes, you can have separate domain teams own their own dbt projects, and those projects can build upon each other seamlessly and have software engineering like interfaces governed by contracts, versioning, and access controls. This essentially puts domain teams in control of their own data pipelines with guardrails and allows them to just have to reason about the part of the dbt lineage that is actually directly relevant to their work. They can easily reference other dbt models from other teams and ensure that it is bolstered by the confidence that nothing will ever break unexpectedly for them or their downstream consumers. While also, you can implement a central data team to set global standards for governance. Now, on the other side of this, we were also seeing that we had multiple customers that were bringing in multiple platforms, either through organic growth, acquisitions, and migrations. And they had a very similar need for this domain-aligned pattern. So the question at hand that we're really asking is how do we take the dbt mesh paradigm and make it Iceberg ready? And the answer is going to be cross-platform references in dbt mesh. So why don't we take a look at how this actually works? Before I jump into the demo, let me build upon what Jeff mentioned. So as a reminder, we have now two companies in the mix. Jaffel Enterprises purchased Cirque de Jaffel, and Jaffel Enterprises is on Redshift, while Cirque de Jaffel is on Athena. In the past, if they wanted to share data between each other, between their dbt projects, they would have to consolidate to one platform or have to replicate that data. But consolidation means a lot of time-consuming work, needing to translate SQL, audit tables post-replication. And frankly, whatever platform that they choose, it wouldn't be perfect for every workload. Now, it used to be the case that accessing the same data across multiple data platforms required costly or time-intensive data movement or replication. However, with now storing tables in Iceberg table format, Cirque de Jaffel can now make that data accessible from anywhere without the need for replication or movement. So now we're going to jump over to the demo. So first, we will start with the Cirque de Jaffel's project, which is connected to Athena. Our goal here is to ensure that the Jaffel enterprises will be able to see all the Jaffel sold across all of their businesses, including the ones coming from their new concessions business. To do this, they will need access to the output of concession sales model that is built inside of Athena in their Redshift project. Luckily for Cirque de Jaffel, all they have to do is go into their Athena project and update the project configuration. As you can see here, I've already gone ahead and done that. I've updated the model configuration to table type equals Iceberg. And now all we have to do is just run the model. Why don't we dive right in and take a look at the logs? You can see at the very top, as we have created this particular model in Iceberg format, and it's writing to our S3 bucket. And great, they successfully updated. You might also see that, hey, we're also calling a particular catalog called AWS Data Catalog. Now, this is how we're connecting to the Glue data catalog so that we can resolve the three-part namespace to ensure that Redshift can also read from the right metadata. Now that we've successfully created this Iceberg model in S3, it's now accessible for all AWS services. Now, the next thing we have to do before we jump over to our Redshift project is to ensure that this model is selectable in dbt mesh. All we have to do is in a resource YAML or in our projects.yaml file, we just explicitly say access equals public. Now, as part of this, we can also add an additional dbt mesh functionality like contracts to add another level of governance and trust in the data for downstream users. But we've already gone ahead and done this. Now let's pretend with the power of movie magic, that I've merged this all in to production and had a job successfully ran so that all of these models are now available in production from other dbt projects in the same account. Now we'll jump into the Redshift project. Now, to get a full picture of every Jaffle sold, we're going to want to take the output of concession sales and then join it to the existing orders table from Jaffle Enterprises. All we have to do this is first set up dbt mesh, which declares, hey, I have a project dependency to a project called Start Jaffle. This will allow us now to use the two-part ref, which includes selecting from the project that we want to query from and the model. And when we run this particular model, what we're going to do is union together a data set that lives inside of Redshift with a data set that lives in S3 created by Athena and dbt. Now, I'm going to go ahead and run this model and thus get an output that will be built in Redshift. The nice thing here is we never had to set up something like external tables or use Redshift Spectrum. It just works. And the last cherry on top is once this is all built and in production, it's not just the teams who've actually worked on setting up this requirement that have awareness of the dependencies. It's everyone who has access to these projects with the right permissions. You can see here we have several projects and several tables that are then utilized from Athena to Redshift and vice versa. So the beauty of this here is in dbt Explorer, we can see the lineage from project to project, platform to platform. I hope you learned a lot from that demo. And if you have any more questions, please ask them in the chat. And I'm also pretty easy to find in dbt Slack, so please do reach out. We would love to talk with you about how this can be implemented in your project. Jeff, is there anything else you want to add in?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I think Iceberg and cross-platform mesh are really going to unlock a lot of capabilities for our customers who have sort of diverse data landscapes. And I guess the thing I'm really excited about going into 2025 is to see what all of you end up doing with all of these new capabilities. We build things with an idea that we're helping our customers in a certain way. And every single time you all surprise us with new and creative ways in which to use the dbt platform to build some pretty incredible things. So, Amy, thank you for sharing with us a lot of the work that your team is doing. I'm really excited about seeing some of our dbt core foundational data teams bring dbt cloud and scale their impact. And again, want to thank everyone for joining us today. Leah, I'll hand it back to you to wrap up and take us home.
Thanks so much, Jeff and Amy, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I've got some next steps here for you. So you can meet with a DBT Cloud expert by clicking the orange button at the top right-hand corner of Goldcast and meet with them about your specific use case, get all your questions answered. Please join us for the next virtual event in this series focused on DBT Explorer. You can register with the link in the docs section of Goldcast. And then I also sent a survey in the chat. I'd really appreciate it if y'all could take that survey, give us feedback on what you liked, what you didn't like. We'd love to know how to improve these sessions for y'all in the future. So let's give a round of applause to our presenters today. And thanks so much for joining us. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your holiday season and a happy new year. And I hope we see y'all for part 3 of this series, 1DBT series, in January. All right, thanks so much. Bye. Happy holidays. Bye.